I like to say I was the queen of regret hell and could take any situation and second guess it, make it into cause for regret, self-doubt, taking responsibility for someone else's reactions, coming up with a story and a beautiful movie I played for myself of how it could have gone differently and then, just really going into this I could feel the minute I switched into that it would flood my body. I mostly felt it in my stomach, and I so feel like in some ways having recovered from that, the poster child now for those of us who disempower ourselves when it matters most, both in situations with others and in the dialogue in our own heads, and what that does to us. So it's, for me, phenomenal and life-changing that I finally have this tool, because I honestly did not think I would ever know how to overcome that. And that's why I was fearful and indecisive and anxious a lot, because not only was I afraid of the outcome, I was more afraid that I would beat myself up for the decisions I made along the way, and that I completely blame myself for the outcome. So the reason I call it regret hell is because hell is a place traditionally of no forgiveness, and you're just stuck there and it's horrible. And that's the way it felt. I didn't know how to get out of it, and could even think of something years later and still get that flood of, if only it, if only. So those words, if only, that's one of the red flags, or why didn't I, or I should have, or I shouldn't have, or I could have. And so just I have spent much of my life becoming an expert on this topic of self-hatred and lack of self-forgiveness, and have written a 300-page book about it. In fact, a lot of that partly going into the cost to ourselves, to our families, to our society, of this habit of turning on ourselves. And part of it also is just looking at the innocence in the thoughts that come in. And there's so much out there that says you create your thoughts, you create your reality. And to really almost show proof of the fact that the thoughts just show up and they come out of this programming. So we're going to work with that today and find your own situation and work through it. And I know some of you have been exposed to the wheel of self-love recently through the challenge, through a 3-day event, and some of you have worked it a lot. It's changed your life in some way to be able to go there and find your innocence the way it did with me. And yet it seems like every time we go into it, people hear something new. So if you have visited it before, just be right there with yourself. So I'm just going to tell a little situation of my own and start thinking of and making notes, even as I talk and before we go into our little meditation, of how you beat yourself up. What does it really look like? I always think there's kind of two sides of this. There's blame and shame. There's judgment of others and judgment of yourself. There's sort of, it's focused out and it's focused in. So we're looking at the inward focus now. It's funny because when it comes to situations to work through with the wheel of self-love, if you are in that beating yourself up, regret, hell place, oh my goodness, you know it. You can't ignore it. If you're not, it's sometimes a little hard to find one and just pull one out of the hat. But I'm going to be asking you to look for that. But also right now, as I'm talking about my situation, look at the places where you do it to yourself. It can be just something as little as making a decision about time. And what do you tell yourself? That's the other thing. Start jotting down in any given situation where I see that I have turned on myself. What do I tell myself? What am I doing? basically what we're doing is often playing a movie of wishing it had been different. So in my case tonight, a lot of things happened today where I was supposed to go to Home Depot. I'm in the thick of a major addition and having this big issue about some doors, some tall custom doors that just months and months have gone by. And I had an appointment with the door person, and there was a span of time, and I had so much other stuff going on that I went for the very end of that span of time. And it turns out the person had never been there at all today. They were sick. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to stay here and take care of other business at Home Depot and look at tile and things like that. And then I had a return to do at Lowe's. So by the time I drove to Lowe's, I was really sleepy. So I thought, oh, I'm going to just take a little nap right here in this sunny car. It was so lovely. I didn't even answer a call from Sandy, believe it or not. And then went into Lowe's and looked at tiles some more because there was a big line at the returns desk. And then I thought, well, I'm not even going to be able to return it because I've got the group tonight. I'll just have to go. But when I got up, there was no line. So I went through the return thing. And then I was like, but I was going to eat while I was here. So I was getting really short on time. I was like, I can do it. I can do it. I'm going to go there. I'm going to just get this new thing I'm doing, which is that I've never really been to Olive Garden, bottomless soup and salad. So I'm like, that'll just take a minute. And the guy was really great, the bartender, and it was really great. And yet it still put me, and then there was traffic, and I saw my mind starting to blame traffic. It was really something because I used to do that for work. I was almost always late for work, and I would always blame traffic. And so I was like, wait a minute, why are you doing that? And I started beating myself up and saying, oh, why did you do that? Why did you stay so long? Why did you go out to eat? Why didn't you, why did you look at tile for so long? It's just like, so watch what you do to yourself. So even as an expert in overcoming regret and self-hatred, and it wasn't like a big, heavy emotional thing. I knew I would survive, but then I go right into the story about what's going to happen. I'm going to be late, and how that's going to impact you, and what you're going to think and what you're going to say, and just mostly being hard on myself. And so I actually worked the wheel of self-love right there. The biggest thing was I went back to the junctures along the way where I made the decisions. And so that's what we're going to do tonight, which is step one is probably the biggest change for me, is that ability to find my own innocence. And the way you do that is go to a moment where there's something you regret and ask yourself, what were you thinking and believing in that moment? And so I did that, and I saw the logical choices I made at every single juncture. I also saw the way I was in denial about the time and about the fact that even though it was fairly late, it was still a Friday night and there might be traffic. So I both acknowledged to myself a place where I went into an old habit of kind of being in denial or cutting a corner or believing that somehow I was immune to the the unfolding of time and consequences and all of that. So I caught that without being hard on myself, and I went, oh yeah, you've done a lot better, and yet there it is. And I also saw, yes, it made sense to look at tile. You're going to the auction tomorrow. You wanted to know what your options were at both other places, because first I just was beating myself up about the tile. So I went back and I got to the point where I was going to be okay with myself. And then you go into, okay, what am I fearing? And that wasn't too big, but it was enough that you will have to get to the point in step two where no matter what you're fearing, if you can go all the way to worst case. So for me, worst case is that your time was wasted. You're mad at me. You drop out of my programs. You never get the gifts of what I think I have to give. You can go all the way with any of your situations to worst case scenario is everything goes down the tubes. I'm homeless in the gutter. It's amazing how many people go to homeless in the gutter. And so I didn't used to be able to even think about all the worst case stuff, even though that really is what was scaring me, that my mind would go there. Now, as part of step 2, I actually go there and I say, no matter what happened, I guess it was doing the best I could in the moment. And to find that. And even if it's something like my denial about time, as an old pattern that I still have to overcome, because I get very caught up in what I'm doing and really passionate about what I'm doing and kind of forget what's going on, on the other end. Okay, we cannot function beyond the level of our own evolution. So in that moment, if that's the best I could do, that I deserve my own support and forgiveness with that. And that doesn't mean we just run roughshod over everybody else and say, well, fine, I was innocent, I was doing the best I could, screw you. It's not like that. And my brother even, it's funny, he's been reading Power versus Force that I recommended to him by David Hawkins. And he's just fascinated with it and getting all these revelations about the work we're doing. And he's like, well, then you could just use that and say, well, I can go out and do whatever I want. And then, I can rob a bank and then say I was doing the best I could. And I just don't see that it works that way. I told him that the people that are working this thing don't use it. They don't use it to their advantage, knowing that you finally have a way to stand with, by, and for yourself and find that you were doing the best you could, does somehow not become an excuse to take shortcuts. It actually puts you into greater integrity, because you're less likely to blame the traffic. You're more likely to come home and be with yourself and just really take a look and make better choices and better choices and better choices the next time, because of that honesty and support of yourself. You're also more likely to go back and make amends where you have done harm. And it's a different kind of amends that we'll talk about a little. We don't cover it very much in this group, but rather than going, oh, I'm so sorry, will you please forgive me, and then you feel better because the other person says, oh, that's okay, you come in and you're like, you know what, I saw what I was thinking, and I'm concerned about the consequences to you of my actions. I'm working on this, and is there anything I can do to make it right? Because I feel my behavior probably has impacted on you, and become really curious about the other person. So that's the other really big outcome, and that I write about in the book, is this level of self-responsibility goes up instead of coming down. When we're beating ourselves up and not knowing how to find forgiveness, it's really hard to even take a look at what we've actually been doing and how it's impacting others. So anyway, and then finally, if I ask, okay, what do I want from others? I want them to understand. I want them to cut me some slack. I want whatever. It turns out, as part of step 2 is, can you absolutely know that this bad thing you fear that you caused is going to happen? And it turns out it didn't. I was here on time. We started, I turned on my camera about 2 minutes late, but I was, we even let people know we're going to start about 2 minutes late. So within the context of that, I was on time. So that's part of step 2, is to ask, can you even know this thing will happen? Like, often our minds go, oh no, I said that, they're going to be mad at me. And even if you say, well, no, I can't absolutely know that they're going to be mad at me, I still say go to worst case scenario and help out the parts that say, yeah, but it could be. It could be that I'm going to be 15 minutes late if the traffic gets worse, and go all the way there. And you can find that there is no benefit of bringing more pain into the world by beating yourself up. One thing you might work, if you don't have a regret situation looking back, is realize that a regret situation often happens in the future. Is your dream of the future of this bad thing having happened, and you're there beating yourself up, believing that you caused it. And so that's where a lot of fear comes from, and a lot of regret is actually projected onto the future, that this bad thing will happen and we will have only ourselves to blame, which paralyzes us in the moment, because we're like, oh no, I wouldn't be able to handle that, so I don't know what to do. And the mind thinks that you're going to get control or be in charge, or if I just get this right, then I'll get the reaction I want and I'll be safe and I'll get my way and whatever. But the best you can do is what you can do in the moment with what you have. And but I also say work through your fear to the extent that you can, so that you really can be in that no matter what way. You know what? I do feel good about this. And no matter what happens, I'm not going to turn on myself, because that would be the worst thing of all. That really does, just kill love in the world, is to add more pain by beating ourselves up.